Welcome back. As you know, I love to read and I love to talk to authors. And the one thing I didn't tell you was that Libby Gill, besides doing everything else, I don't know when she has time for anything, also is an author and wrote this fabulous book, Traveling Hopefully, How to Lose Your Family Baggage and Jumpstart Your Life. Will you please put your hands together for Libby Gill? Hey! Hi, sweetie. Good to see you too. And beautiful to boot. How about that, huh?
Too nice. I'm going to be back here every week.
Well, that's fine. You're welcome. That would be a lot of fun. That really would. Hey, how did you make your transition, Libby? I mean, you started off as a high-powered executive for Sony, for Universal, 15 years.
Right.
How did you follow your heart? What made you decide to change?
Well, I have to say, I started off as a temp, is how I really started off, and worked my way up. So I started at the bottom. I got to a point after 15 years that I thought, I have worked so hard to get where I no longer want to be. And I just had one of those real epiphanies of thinking, I don't want to be here for another 15 years. I better figure this out. And I looked at what was meaningful to me in the corporate world. I loved mentoring. I loved working with staff. I loved helping people define where they wanted to go in their careers. And I started writing. I wrote a parenting book. I started teaching university. And I thought, that's it. I'm out. I'm done. I'm going to start my own business. And I was in my late 40s when I started my business. I published my first book, and I just started life over.
You reinvented.
I reinvented.
Totally reinvented. And that's what you're doing today. You're teaching people how to create their own personal branding. Now, personal branding, what is that? Is that a motto or something you live by? What is it?
Well, you know, it's funny, but in this era when we can all be famous, we can all be authors, musicians, whatever we want to be, we've got YouTube, the internet, everything. Right. It's so important to define who you are as opposed to letting the world assign you a brand or a role in the world. So I tell people to define their brand so they can design their life. And I just took my business background of working in the studios and branding celebrities and television shows, and I take that to a personal level.
I think that's really great because we were just talking to our daughter about it. She's graduating from college right now, and she was saying, oh, I don't know if I should go into be a broker because brokers are labeled as being really tough and this and that. And I said, wait a minute. I said, look, stand back, because people can say actresses are all stupid or flighty, or that attorneys are sharks, or there are all these horrible labels we put upon people.
Right.
So what you're doing is really, really, really terrific. As far as your background, you came from. I mean, you came from a rough background, since you had a lot to overcome.
Personal background? Yeah, I did. I came from my dad was an alcoholic. I was a kid. We were sort of a riches to rags story, basically. My dad was an old-fashioned Freudian analyst, a psychiatrist, and we grew up in the South. I was one of 6 kids, and my oldest brother died on Christmas morning, and that's that time that families either really pull together or they fall apart. And mine fell apart, and my dad left my mother 3 months after that, and she was, for the first time in her adult life, 5 young kids to raise by herself, and he married a psychiatric patient, which was a no-no. It's certainly in that day and age in the South. And she started life over, and oddly enough, in her late 40s, went back to work and started a completely different life. So it was a difficult time. I went back and forth from family to family for my entire adolescence.
Sure, and so that's part of the baggage, which we'll talk about later when we talk about the book. Did your stepmother influence you with the way she reinvented? Did you study her and her reinvention? Do you think she had any influence on that?
Well, I'll tell you something that is not in my book, and I don't think I've certainly have never mentioned on the air, but my stepmother was still really a wounded person, and she ultimately committed suicide. Wow. So I grew up with that, she was this lovely sort of Southern, she was a writer, and she was very sort of poetic type and very beautiful, and most of my childhood and adolescence she was behind closed doors crying.
Wow, you say that in your book.
Yeah, so I didn't know what was up. There was no maternal role model on either side. My mother was furious at my father for many years.
Of course.
My stepmother was damaged, and I was sort of caught in between.
I would think that experience and that understanding, that compassion that you had for her, the way that she influenced your life is part of what carries you to where you are today.
Right.
Now, if you were going to brand someone, you were going to brand someone like anyone. If I came to you as a client, how would you assess? How would you assess me?
Well, first, and this is what I do as a coach, people come to me, I get right to what are their core values? Are they looking for freedom? Are they looking for adventure? Are they looking for security? I mean, there's a whole range of things that are important to us. Then we look at the skill set, you know, what do they have to offer in the marketplace, in the world, and look at their passions. Do they love the outdoors? Do they like working in teams? We really look at that. Like, one woman came to me, and she was an engineer, and hated her job. You know, for someone else it was great. She had this secret passion to do something that was more aesthetic, more creative, and she really was drawn to the media industry. Now, we had to start with her with a real internal branding so that she began to talk to herself about herself in a completely different way and to see that she had gifts and skills that were transferable. Once she did the internal homework, then we could repackage her, present her to the outside world, and now she's a vice president at a global media company.
Isn't that fantastic?
Yeah, it's great.
Wonderful. That's really terrific. I think maybe that's why a lot of the universities are teaching breadth and depth now. Don't you think so? They're wanting people to explore different sides rather than just the engineer. The engineer has another side, like that you brought out, this wonderful, the right brain, left brain. We all have both that are working together.
And it's such a complex world now. I mean, I've got two teenagers. One's getting ready for college, and it's a completely different, well, you've gone through it. It's a different experience than when we were kids. And the world is so complicated. If you don't chunk it down and figure out who you are and how you want to represent yourself. Even in a company, if it's the person at the next cubicle, you may have the same skill set, you may have the same job, but how do you distinguish yourself?
Exactly. What makes you different? What makes you special?
Right.
And you have to keep honing that.
What's your daughter going to do that's going to, if she decides she's going to be a broker or an attorney or whatever she decides, how will she distinguish herself for promotions, for raises, for other jobs?
Right.
And how does she decide what's really part of her passion and her real core values? Because I tell people, don't get stuck in a job that you hate. We really don't have to do that.
We don't have to do that now. No. We're going to continue our conversation and talk about your book, Traveling Hopefully, when we come back. Stay tuned. It's tongue-tied here.
Winter's day, you're so far from home.